You stand before me, troubled by the question that has haunted every sensitive soul. Why do they not understand me? You try to explain, justify, and reason with the unreasonable. You speak light into a void that cannot receive it. And yet, the void does what it has always done. It consumes. You think you are conversing with a person, but you are actually confronting an archetype. You are not speaking to their conscious self. You are facing the shadow that has taken dominion within them. When I say stop explaining yourself to demons in people, I am not speaking in superstition, but in the language of psychic truth. The word demon is older than theology. It is psychological before it is moral. The Greeks called them daimons, spirits of destiny, intermediaries between gods and men, carriers of unconscious content. They were not evil by nature, but they could possess, distort, or destroy when the human vessel was unprepared to integrate their energy. So when I speak of demons in people, I refer to those autonomous psychic fragments that have broken away from the conscious personality, those energies that have seized control of thought, emotion, and perception, reducing a soul to a mask. Many people live under possession without knowing it. They are polite, intelligent, even loving, yet within them operates an energy that is not their own. Watch their eyes. When you tell the truth, you will see a flicker, a resistance, a sudden chill. It is not the person who rejects you. It is the demon that fears exposure. The human personality acts merely as the mouthpiece of that deeper possession. When you continue to explain yourself to such a one, you are feeding the complex, you are nourishing what seeks to devour your psychic autonomy. You see, the unconscious does not argue, it projects, it does not listen, it mirrors. Therefore, when you attempt to explain your light to someone who is ruled by their darkness, you are not engaging in dialogue, you are disturbing an archetype that perceives your illumination as threat. The possessed ego, sensing annihilation, fights back with ridicule, gaslighting, or withdrawal. It is a spiritual immune response, not of health, but of infection, and every time you plead for understanding, you are asking the darkness to validate the light, an impossible demand. Do not misunderstand me. I'm not telling you to hate people. I'm asking you to recognize energies. To discriminate is not to condemn. It is to see with eyes that pierce the veil. For not every human voice you hear originates from a conscious center. Some speak from wounds, some from ancestral trauma, some from the collective shadow that broods beneath our civilization. You cannot reason with that which is unconscious. You can only witness it and choose not to merge with it. Let me tell you of a patient, a brilliant man who could articulate every philosophy, yet was enslaved by resentment. When anyone disagreed with him, he became inflamed, almost possessed. He would say, I must make them see the truth. But the more he explained, the deeper his loneliness grew. I asked him once, why do you need to be understood? He answered, because if they see me, I exist, and there lay the demon, the child within him who had been unseen, who now demanded recognition from the very archetypes that wounded him. His compulsion to explain was not love, it was a survival mechanism of the unloved psyche. The desire to explain yourself endlessly is often a symptom of psychic disempowerment. It means you are trying to earn permission to be real, but the self does not need permission. The self is when you try to persuade others of your purity, your intent, your truth. You are confessing that you doubted yourself. The shadow seizes upon this doubt and attracts mirrors people who embody your unacknowledged insecurity. They become the stage upon which your inner conflict performs. Understand this paradox. The more you explain yourself to those possessed by their demons, the more you affirm their reality and deny yours. Every explanation is an offering, an energy transaction. The demon feeds not on your words, but on the psychic charge behind them, your guilt, your fear of rejection, your hunger for belonging. The moment you stop explaining, you interrupt the ritual of psychic vampirism. Silence becomes your exorcism. People think exorcism requires holy water and chanting, but the truest form of exorcism is individuation. The process by which you reclaim every fragment of your own psyche and cease projecting it onto others. When you individuate, you no longer need the approval of the possessed to affirm your sanity. You simply see them and choose distance. That distance is sacred. It is the space in which you return to yourself. Do not think of demons as merely moral evils. They are patterns, energies, complexes with intelligence of their own. They live off repetition, conflict, guilt. They whisper, explain yourself, justify yourself, surrender your peace, and if you obey, they grow. But when you hold your ground, when you say nothing, yet remain rooted in truth, you deprive them of fuel. The light that refuses to bow before darkness becomes intolerable to the possessed. They will either flee or attempt to destroy you. Do not take either personally. It is the ancient war between consciousness and unconsciousness. I remember writing once that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed, but when one of those personalities is possessed by a demon, by an unintegrated complex, the reaction becomes volatile. You, the conscious one, may attempt to transmute it into gold, but remember, even the alchemist protects himself from the fumes of transformation. Compassion does not mean proximity. Understanding does not require explanation. You may wonder why you keep encountering such people, why the world seems filled with those who misunderstand, misrepresent, or misuse you. The answer lies not in them, but in the pattern of your own psyche. The unconscious arranges outer encounters to reveal inner conflicts. Each person who resists your truth mirrors the aspect of yourself that still fears it. The demon outside is a dramatization of the demon within the inner voice that doubts your worth. When you cease needing external validation, that inner demon loses its hold, and outer adversaries dissolve like mist at dawn. To stop explaining yourself, You must accept solitude, not loneliness, but sacred aloneness, the state in which the self communes directly with the divine unconscious. The crowd cannot accompany you there. The path of individuation is a wilderness where language fails, only symbols remain fire. Water, serpent, dove, the eternal alphabet of the soul. Every time you justify yourself, you descend from symbol to argument, from mystery to noise, but your essence is not meant to be debated. It is meant to be lived. Think of Christ before Pilate. The governor demanded explanations, yet the Christ stood silent. That silence was not weakness, it was supreme mastery. He understood that truth does not negotiate with ignorance. The demon demands dialogue because it feeds on attention. The Christ gives silence because he recognizes the futility of words before blindness. So too must you learn the holy art of withdrawal, not the bitter retreat of resentment, but the calm detachment of one who knows his worth. When you no longer feel compelled to explain, you rise above the psychic contagion of the collective. You become a mirror rather than a participant, an observer of archetypes at play. The human world today is possessed by many demons: ideology, self-righteousness, the worship of opinion. Everyone is explaining, no one is listening. Social media has become a collective exorcism that only deepens possession. The more people shout their truth, the more truth evaporates. Explanation without introspection is noise. Silence without repression is wisdom. To live in alignment with yourself is to speak only when words emerge from inner necessity, not from compulsion. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin expressing yourself. There is a vast difference. Explanation seeks to persuade. Expression seeks to reveal. The first drains energy. The second radiates it. Let me share a dream a woman once told me. She stood in a room full of mirrors, trying to find her reflection. Each mirror showed a different face: angry, sad, mocking, indifferent. She kept pleading with the reflections, "Please see me." Then a voice whispered from behind, "Turn around." She turned, and there was no mirror, only an open door leading to a vast field under the night sky. When she stepped through, the mirrors shattered silently. This is what happens when you stop explaining yourself to demons in people. The hall of mirrors collapses, and the soul steps into the field of its own authenticity. The psyche hungers for wholeness, not agreement. You are not here to make others see you. You are here to see through yourself. The compulsion to explain is the ego's attempt to control perception. The willingness to be misunderstood is the self's expression of freedom. So, I ask you, the next time you feel the urge to defend your heart to those who mock it, pause, feel the tremor in your chest, the anxiety that says, "They must know I meant well." That tremor is the demon's hook. Breathe, withdraw, attention. Let the misunderstanding stand. Truth needs no lawyer. Consciousness needs no approval. When you cease explaining, You enter the alchemical vessel of transformation. The silence that follows becomes a furnace where the dross of dependency burns away, leaving only gold, the incorruptible awareness of who you are. And yet, you ask, if I do not explain myself, how will the world understand me? The answer, my friend, is that the world was never designed to understand the individual. It was designed to protect the collective illusion. The more individuated you become, the more you threaten that illusion. The collective psyche feeds on conformity, and every act of self-clarity is an act of rebellion against its hypnosis. When you stop explaining yourself, you are performing the most radical alchemy there is. You are dissolving the false bond between your worth and others' approval. In this act, the soul begins its descent into the underworld, the sacred confrontation with all that was repressed in order to be loved. There, you will meet your own demons, and they will not look monstrous at first. They will look like you. Your politeness, your helpfulness, your desire to be liked. Each of these masks was born to protect you from rejection, and yet they became the very prisons that now suffocate your essence. The compulsion to explain is the echo of the old survival strategy. It is the voice of the child who once believed, if they only understood me, they would love me. But love built on understanding is fragile, for understanding fluctuates. True love is born from presence, from seeing without needing to define. When you speak to someone who cannot see, your words become pearls cast before swine, not because the other is evil, but because their perception is not yet mature enough to value what you offer. Do not hate them for this blindness. It is archetypal. Remember the myth of Prometheus, who brought fire to mankind. The fire of consciousness is a gift, but to those who dwell in shadow, it burns. They will call you arrogant, too intense, too much, not realizing that it is not you who are too bright, but their own inner eyes that remain unopened. To explain yourself to such people is to dim the flame. It is to betray the very gift you were meant to carry. The demon in them does not seek truth. It seeks containment. It wants you small, predictably, apologetics. The moment you explain, you step down from the mountain of your vision to dwell again in the valley of misunderstanding. And the valley has no memory of the mountain. Consider this. Every archetype, when awakened, evokes its opposite. The healer attracts the wounded. The prophet attracts the deaf. The light bearer attracts those whose inner night is intolerable. When you embody truth, the collective shadow seeks you out, not because you have failed, but because the unconscious desires integration. You become a mirror for what the world refuses to see. That mirror is not always loved. It is often shattered. I once knew a woman who possessed rare spiritual sensitivity. She could sense the emotional states of others as if they were her own. She believed this was empathy, but it was possession. She would meet people tormented by bitterness, and instead of observing, she absorbed. If I can explain love to them, she would say, they will heal. But the more she explained, the more they drained her. Her light dimmed until she was left with exhaustion and doubt. I told her, "You are not their healer. You are their reflection. The moment you explain what they cannot see, you take their blindness into yourself. And to explain truth to the unready is to steal from your own vitality. The unconscious resists forced illumination. The more you push the light, the deeper the shadow digs in. Only silence, patience, and presence can outlast the demon's resistance. For when you do not fight darkness, it burns itself out. When you do not explain to blindness, the blindness confronts its own emptiness. You must learn to distinguish between communication and communion. Communication is of the intellect. It seeks understanding. Communion is of the soul. It seeks resonance. You cannot have communion with someone ruled by demons, because demons do not resonate. They echo. They mimic empathy but do not embody it. You will notice it in their speech. It loops, it deflects, it twists meaning. It is not the person doing this, it is the complex within them trying to maintain psychic control. The tragedy of the modern age is that many mistake possession for personality. They think their rage, envy, or cynicism are simply who they are. But no, these are energies that have overtaken them, feeding on psychic wounds left unattended. When you explain yourself to such a person, your words do not reach their heart. They feed the parasite that guards it. That is why you leave such conversations feeling drained, dizzy, or guilty, as though you had committed some invisible sin. You have not sinned. You have simply forgotten the laws of energy exchange. In analytical psychology, we understand that every interaction is a ritual of psychic energy. Attention is the currency of the soul. When you give your attention to what cannot receive it, you create a deficit in your own psychic economy. You begin to feel unbalanced, resentful, confused. These are symptoms not of moral failure, but of energetic leakage. To stop explaining yourself is to stop leaking. It is to close the psychic circuit and let your life force circulate within your own system again. The mystics of every tradition knew this. The desert fathers called it hezekiah, holy stillness. The Taoists called it wu-wei, effortless action. The Sufis called it fana, dissolution of the ego, in divine awareness. In all these paths, silence is not emptiness, it is power. Words dissipate energy. Silence concentrates it. When you remain silent in the presence of the possessed, you are not avoiding conflict. You are reclaiming sovereignty. Let us look deeper. What is this demon in people? It is not a mythic creature, but an autonomous psychic complex born of repression and trauma. When the ego refuses to integrate pain, the pain becomes personified. It develops its own will, emotion, and intention. This fragment of the psyche then seeks validation through projection. It looks for hosts, for mirrors, for victims. It thrives in unexamined relationships. It manipulates through guilt and confusion, drawing you into endless explanations. The more you explain, the more it survives. To break the spell, You must recognize when dialogue has turned into ritual, every argument that circles endlessly, every apology that multiplies rather than ends conflict, is a ritual of the demon. The moment you feel that sinking, spiraling energy in conversation, the sense that no amount of truth will suffice, stop. You have entered the labyrinth of projection. There is no exit there, except silence. Many of you fear silence because you equate it with defeat. But silence is not surrender, it is transcendence. In silence, you declare, I no longer play this game. You withdraw from the arena of the shadow and return to the temple of the self. The demon cannot follow you there, for it cannot exist without opposition. It feeds on reaction, on justification. The moment you stop providing resistance, it stutters. But do not imagine this is easy. To stop explaining yourself requires inner strength, and strength comes from knowing your own shadow. You cannot confront the demon in others until you have befriended the demon within. The moment you deny your own darkness, you project it outward, and thus you meet it everywhere. The only way to disarm the demon is to integrate it, to say, yes, I too contain envy, rage, confusion. In that humble acknowledgement, the shadow loses its autonomy. It becomes human again. So the next time you encounter hostility or misunderstanding, look inward first. Ask, what in me is reacting? Is it the wounded child who needs validation? The perfectionist who fears imperfection? The savior who wants to rescue everyone? Each of these inner figures is a potential doorway for the demon's entry. Close the door by seeing it. Awareness is the only exorcism that works, and then remain still. The world will interpret your silence as pride, indifference, or mystery. Let it. You owe no explanation for your evolution. You owe no translation for your transformation. The butterfly does not write essays to the caterpillars explaining why it left the cocoon. In the end, to stop explaining yourself to demons and people is not arrogance. It is love, love for the sanctity of your own soul. For when you no longer waste your sacred fire in futile persuasion, you have energy again to create, to dream, to connect with those whose eyes can see. You will find that the right people never demand explanation. They recognize you. Recognition is silent, understanding the meeting of souls beyond words. If you wish to know whether someone is ruled by demons or by spirit, observe this. How do you feel after leaving their presence? Lighter, clearer, inspired or confused, guilty, diminished? Your body knows before your mind does. The body is the oldest instrument of intuition. It remembers what the intellect forgets. When your heart tightens, when your breath shortens, when you find yourself rehearsing explanations in your head long after the conversation ends, you have met a demon. Bow inwardly, forgive the vessel, and depart. Do not fight them. Do not preach to them. Do not diagnose them. Simply withdraw your energy and bless them in silence. For even the demons are fragments of the divine seeking redemption through contrast. Your task is not to cure them, but to remain whole in their presence. In doing so, you become the living symbol of integration, the light that neither attacks nor yields. When I speak to you of demons, I speak also of the collective possession that grips our time, the mass hysteria of ideologies, the addiction to being right. Humanity is possessed not by monsters from without, but by its own unintegrated archetypes. We explain and explain to each other, to ourselves, to the void. And in the process, we lose contact with being. The cure is not more dialogue, but deeper consciousness, silence that listens to the soul, not the noise of the crowd. So stop explaining, not because others are unworthy, but because your truth is not an argument, it is an emanation. The self does not persuade, it radiates. When you stand rooted in that still center, even demons tremble, for they remember what they were before the fall, fragments of divine light awaiting return. And some, seeing your calm, will awaken, others will flee. Let both be. When the soul stops explaining, something astonishing begins to happen. The center of gravity shifts from the outer to the inner world. You start to sense an ancient stillness within, as though a great, forgotten temple is awakening inside you. You hear no applause there, no arguments, no need to prove, only a silent flame burning with the knowledge of its own light. That flame is the self, the divine core that no demon, no projection, no misunderstanding can touch. This is what I call individuation, not perfection, but wholeness. The act of turning inward, integrating every shadow, and ceasing to demand that the outer world confirm your truth. It is the sacred rebellion against the collective hypnosis of validation. For as long as you explain yourself to others, you are still tethered to their perception. You are living in exile from your own authority. The true disciple of the self must walk the lonely road of being misunderstood. Only then does inner authority arise. The self speaks not in words, but in symbols. It reveals itself through dreams, through synchronicities, through those strange coincidences that feel like whispers from another realm. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to listen again. You begin to hear the symbolic language of your own soul. Dreams that once seemed chaotic start to make sense. You realize that every demon you met outwardly was a messenger, inwardly an archetype demanding integration. Do not fear the demons you meet in others. They are the projections of the collective shadow. Yes, but they are also your teachers. They show you where your compassion ends and your self-respect must begin. They test your discernment, your psychic boundaries, your ability to remain rooted in truth amidst distortion. Every time you encounter hostility and choose stillness, you reclaim a piece of your own divine authority. Every time you refuse to explain, you announce to the universe, I am no longer a fragment, I am whole. You may feel guilt at first. The mind, conditioned by centuries of moral confusion, whispers that silence is cruelty, that Withdrawal is arrogance, but this guilt is the residue of codependency, the soul's addiction to approval. The ego craves witnesses for its goodness, but the self needs none. The moment you realize that your worth exists independent of others' understanding, you taste the freedom that saints, mystics, and philosophers all sought in different languages. Let me speak to you as one who has stood in the labyrinth of human emotion. The unconscious is vast, and its forces are not all benign. When you touch truth, you disturb archetypes that have slept for millennia. They rise in others as resistance, mozeri, or fear. You cannot prevent this. Your only task is to stay awake. The more you explain, the more you are drawn back into the hypnosis of the collective. The less you explain, the clearer your inner sight becomes. There is a moment in every individual's journey when they realize that explanation is a subtle form of self-betrayal. It is the moment when your energy shifts from proving to embodying. You no longer wish to convince, you simply are. The wise do not argue with shadows. They stand before them, unshaken, until the shadows remember their source in light. One evening, a patient came to me, trembling with confusion. She had tried to explain herself to everyone, her parents, her lover, her friends, yet none could understand her truth. They twist my words, she said, as if my honesty were their threat. I asked her, what if your truth was never meant to be explained? What if it was meant to be lived? She stared at me, tears softening her eyes, and whispered, then I have wasted so much energy. I smiled gently and replied, energy cannot be wasted if it leads you home. And there is no greater homecoming than the return to silence. When you live from that silence, even speech becomes sacred. You begin to speak, not to persuade, but to transmit. Words then carry a vibration, not a demand. They become like arrows of light, piercing the fog of illusion, not through volume, but through presence. The alchemists knew this mystery well. They spoke of solve et coagula, dissolve and reform. To stop explaining yourself is to dissolve the old identity built on approval. To remain silent in the face of misunderstanding is to coagulate into a higher form of being one that radiates truth without needing to defend it. The philosopher's stone is not found in arguments, but in integration. In this silence, you will also meet loneliness. It is the companion of every awakened soul, but do not flee from it. Loneliness, when accepted, becomes solitude. Solitude, when sanctified, becomes communion with the divine unconscious. You begin to sense that every soul, even those possessed by demons, is secretly yearning for the same wholeness. But you also understand that their journey must unfold at its own pace. You cannot explain light to a seed still buried in darkness. You can only wait and shine and trust the mystery. The world of today fears silence because silence reveals the truth. It exposes how much of our communication is merely noise echoes of possession, projections of fear, When you stop contributing to the noise, you destabilize the collective possession. That is why many will attack your stillness. They will demand your explanations as a form of control. But you must remember, those who demand your words are rarely seeking understanding. They are seeking to tether your energy to their own confusion. When Christ stood before his accusers, his silence was not submission. It was supreme authority. He understood the archetypal battle unfolding, light facing collective shadow, and he knew that any explanation would only feed the drama. This is the same archetype that manifests in your life when you are misunderstood by those ruled by their inner demons. To stand silent in such a moment is to align with the Christ archetype, the consciousness that transcends polarity. Psychologically, this is the birth of the inner king or queen, the sovereign self, that answers not to external tribunals before individuation. You live as a subject of others' opinions. After individuation, you rule your own psychic kingdom. This does not mean you become proud or distant. It means your worth is self-derived. The more you root in that worth, the more compassion you can offer without depletion, because your compassion no longer comes from fear. You will notice that when you stop explaining, certain people vanish from your life. They were not companions of the soul, but contracts of the shadow lessons you had to complete.